Georgia versus Ole Miss, but we begin today with breaking news that you have been talked about for the last few hours. We start with Pete Thamel. You can give us the latest on Coach Harbaugh and Michigan and the suspension that just came down.
Well, the news that came down about an hour ago, Jen, is that the Big Ten is going to punish Michigan for a violation of its sportsmanship policy. And with that punishment of Michigan will come a suspension of Coach Jim Harbaugh for the remainder of the regular season games. Michigan obviously has 3 games remaining at Penn State this weekend, Maryland, and then they host Ohio State to conclude the year. So the story here is that in very detailed form, the Big Ten came out and said that Michigan's alleged sign-stealing ring was not alleged. It calls it proven, and it says that the NCAA shared with the conference a master spreadsheet detailing the extensive in-person scouting activities. So basically, what the Big Ten said is, we are not acting on allegations. We are acting on facts that we have, and we have enough facts in order to go ahead and come to the conclusion that Michigan violated fairness. The words integrity and fairness are littered throughout the Big Ten statements, and they feel like Michigan violated the policy this season, and therefore Michigan should be punished this season, and the conclusion of that punishment is this upcoming suspension of Jim Harbaugh. Key to note, only a game day suspension. So he is allowed to coach the team the other 6 days a week, which is a big line of delineation moving forward.
And Michigan has responded. Here is what Michigan said in part. It is a lengthy statement, so stay with me. Today's action by Commissioner Tony Petitti disregards the conference's own handbook, violates basic tenets of due process, and sets an untenable precedent of assessing penalties before an investigation has been completed. Commissioner Petitti's hasty action today suggests this is more about reacting to pressure from other conference members than a desire to apply the rules fairly and impartially. By taking this action at this hour, the commissioner is personally inserting himself onto the sidelines and altering the level playing field that he is claiming to preserve. And doing so on Veterans Day, a court holiday, to try to thwart the university from seeking immediate judicial relief is hardly a profile in impartiality. To ensure fairness in the process, we intend to seek a court order together with Coach Harbaugh, preventing that disciplinary action from taking effect. Pete, what more can you tell us about what they are asserting there?
Well, Jen, whether or not Jim Harbaugh coaches on the sideline at Penn State this weekend is ultimately going to come down to the decision of a judge, likely in the next few hours. Now, the Michigan statement does say that it is Veterans Day. It is a court holiday, so courts are not in session in the state of Michigan. But there are judges on standby, and I've been told by sources that Michigan has spent days preparing for this, and they do have a way to get the temporary restraining order hearing heard today. So again, a judge is likely on standby, just in general, not just for this case, and the judge will hear the TRO case by Michigan. And if you read the Big Ten statement, it almost sounds like they're making their case in front of the judge, what they won't be able to do in this immediate thing. Now, the next step going forward is within the next 14 days, depending on what the judge decides on the immediate TRO, there would be an injunction hearing, which one source said to me today would be the full Perry Mason. There would be witnesses and everything like that. It would not be jury. It would again be up to a judge. But you'd have both sides coming into the courtroom to give their side to ultimately determine whether or not Jim Harbaugh can remain on the sideline for the remainder of the season. So quickly, Jen, we go from the sideline to the courts as the fate of Michigan in its national championship caliber season is in flux.
And as we know, Michigan already in Happy Valley for that game against Penn State. I guess we'll find out if, in fact, he will be on the sidelines or if he will be watching from afar. He is Pete Thamel. I'm also joined here on College Football Live by Desmond Howard and Stanford Steve. Des, let's go to your first. Your reaction to the punishment that has been handed down to Michigan and falls on the shoulder, it seems, of
Well, guys, it's kind of anticlimactic, you know what I mean? It's like we kind of knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when, not if, and everyone's been preparing for it, so there's no big surprise. I think that you look at the commissioner and his statement and what he's put out there, it's kind of, the hypocrisy is what grabs me, Steve. You know, it's like if it's Michigan, it's sign stealing. If it's someone else, it's sign decoding. If it's Michigan, it's in-person scouting. If it's someone else, it's coaches sharing information from the goodness of their hearts. So the whole thing, man, in reality, it's a distinction without difference to me.
I look at the timing. the timing of when and this happened. As a player, you know when you get our itinerary for the week, you know exactly when that plane is to leave to go play that game, right?
Yeah.
Somebody had to know when that plane was leaving.
Right.
And then, Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, they got the news when they were on the plane headed to Penn State.
Seemingly, I'm not sure how long the flight is. I was told they were wheels up around 3, and I think we got the story around 3:40.
And that's what I look at. Is you knew what the possibilities were, and you waited till that time. And then as far as the suspension, yeah, I think it is too harsh. I do. And when you look at it and what's at stake, and like you said, everybody knew something was coming, but the timing of it all is what really, really bothers me.
Is there any distinction, however, as Pete mentioned, Des, you have played this game, obviously, with a coach being on the sideline, not being on the sideline, rather, but being able to coach his team throughout the week?
So when J.J. McCarthy threw 3 interceptions against Bowling Green State, I told my son, you got to understand, head coaches make their money on Saturday. That's when they add the most value to a team. So to answer your question, to pull him off the sidelines for the Penn State game, for the Maryland game, and for the Ohio State game, it's a shot at the players. It really is. So I'm just so disappointed. I feel for the players. Like, these kids work their butt off. You're a former player. You understand exactly what it is. They don't deserve this. I did get up earlier this morning with Greg McElroy, and he came up with a punishment that would not punish the players in the process, but you still can punish Jim Harbaugh in the program. So my heart just goes out to the players. They've been dealing with so much from the beginning of the season when the NCAA came after him, but we all know it's a level 2 violation, which is a slap on the wrist. They didn't like the way Harbaugh dealt with them, so they said, damn it, because we got the authority, we're going to bump it up to level 1, and we want you to get 4 games. So then they had to lose him for 3 games for that. And now at the end of the season, they have to lose him for another 3 games? How can you not feel for those student athletes, those players who put everything into this season? They're one of the best teams in the country right now, and they have to deal with this type of mess.
So a couple points of clarification for Steve on the timing. Michigan was initially given until Tuesday to respond. They asked for an extra day until Wednesday. They gave long, lengthy legal responses, and the Big Ten, if you read the 13-page document, had to take their time. You just can't take a 10-page response and then Harbaugh's response and do it right away. So that's a little bit of an explanation of the timing. And then Desmond mentioned the other Big Ten schools that were in some sort of sign, as you said, decoding scheme, and the Big Ten addressed that very specifically, Desmond. They said the university also argues that because Michigan believes that others are engaged in decoding signs, there must be nothing wrong with the university's activities. In addition to impermissible activities of others being currently unsupported by facts, the university's culpability is not dependent on the actions of other institutions.
It wasn't supported by facts?
Correct.
I thought Michigan had receipts.
They are saying
we can't go back and forth. I got my laptop.
Yeah, well, they have,
I
have the receipts, but
I got the gun, I got the knife.
The language here, and then this is like vetted legal language.
Exactly.
They say the scheme occurred, and just because Michigan offered procedural and technical arguments designed to delay accountability doesn't mean they should. So essentially, they are saying this isn't an alleged scheme.
Right.
This happened. And they have NCAA documents to prove it, and they think Michigan got a schematic advantage. The players, as you said, got a schematic advantage early this year. Yeah. So the Big Ten's rationale is that Michigan should be punished in some way, and they feel like the fair way. I was told throughout this process the players would not be harmed.
Yeah.
Players wouldn't be suspended. They just
gave Penn State a schematic advantage too.
Well, I mean, that's exactly the point, Desmond.
Exactly what they did.
Michigan had one from Connor Stallions, and now Penn State has one without Jim Harbaugh. Unless, it's a punishment for the crime.
Yeah. Is it a punishment where we're going to do to you what you did to somebody else, or you're supposed to be punished? Because you should never give anybody a schematic advantage. Because you said in your own letter that it can cause harm to players. So you shouldn't do that. Yeah, that's what the Big Ten wrote.
Well, and look, there's a lot of legalese there, and sometimes it can sound like the Charlie Brown teacher a little bit, wah, 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 wah. But bottom line, over the next 24 hours, what do you expect to come out?
I would expect a judge in Ann Arbor, generally, I'm not a legal expert, I want to be clear about that, but I would expect a judge in Ann Arbor to grant the TRO, especially with the timing here. Irreparable harm is the key phrase there that has to be proven. Michigan is going to argue that there's irreparable harm without their head coach there. In the counter argument from the Big Ten is going to be, well, they weren't irreparably harmed the first 3 games when they blew out the first 3 teams they played without their head coach.
Right.
I can't predict what a local court is going to do, a circuit court in Ann Arbor. That's beyond my very limited legal purview. But I would just think generally a judge in Ann Arbor, Michigan would probably go in favor of Michigan. That is just a general hunch. But they're going to dive into the legalese. I had a judge from the courthouse where it's expected to go tell me that the most difficult thing, the hardest part of Michigan's threshold here to prove will be that irreparable harm. So that's what this all is going to come down to, whether or not Jim Harbaugh coaches on Saturday.
And I guess that information that you just presented would keep anyone from being surprised if Jim Harbaugh is in fact on the sideline with Michigan tomorrow versus Penn State. Great work by you, Pete. We appreciate all the insight. There are other stories, as you can imagine, going on this week in the college football space. I know. And we're going to talk about those right now. Pete,